This is a true story, one so horrifying, so unthinkable, that it was whispered through generations. In a small city in Pakistan, Larkana, there lived a ruthless king named Jalal, whose cruelty knew no bounds. He had enforced a law so monstrous that no father, no mother, no husband could defy it. Whenever a girl from the village was married, the king had the first night with her. It was his command, his twisted right. The villagers suffered in silence, too afraid to resist. But fate is a cruel master. One day, the king's own daughter was to be married. The villagers gathered and delivered a chilling message. Now, your daughter's wedding night has come. Will you follow your own law? And that night, something happened, something so terrifying, so divine, that the entire village was swallowed by the earth itself. This is the story of how a tyrant met his doom. Larkana was not always a place of fear. It was once a land of farmers and merchants, a village where families celebrated together and life was simple. But that changed when King Jalal took the throne. He was not an ordinary king. He ruled with an iron fist, treating the people not as his subjects but as his slaves. His word was law, and his law was inhuman. Whenever a girl got married, her wedding night belonged to the king. It was not a whispered rumor. It was a law, enforced by his soldiers. The night of every wedding, the bride was taken from her husband's arms and sent to the king's palace. Her screams would echo through the village, but no one could do anything. The fathers would clench their fists. The mothers would weep. The husbands would rage in silence. But silence was the price of survival. The king's soldiers ensured obedience. Anyone who dared to defy this law was met with merciless execution. Heads rolled in the village square, serving as a warning to others. The people of Larkana lived in a state of endless dread. Every daughter born was a future victim. Every marriage was a curse. But no reign of terror lasts forever. For years, the village suffered, praying for divine justice. And then, one day, fate struck with a poetic cruelty. The king's own daughter, Princess Zoya, had come of age. She was to be married. The entire village held its breath, waiting to see what would happen. The night before the wedding, an eerie silence gripped the land. The elders of the village gathered and made a decision that would change everything. They marched to the king's palace. King Jalal sat on his throne, smug, draped in golden robes, oblivious to what was coming. One of the elders stepped forward. His voice was steady, but his eyes burned with the rage of 1,000 fathers. Badshah Salamat, for years, you have enforced a law upon us. A law that has stolen our daughters, broken our homes, and crushed our souls. Today, your own daughter weds. Now, you must honor your own law. The first night of marriage belongs to the king. Will you take your own daughter? A ripple of shock passed through the court. The courtiers froze. The soldiers glanced at one another in unease. The king's face turned pale. For the first time in his life, he was the one in terror. That night, the king sat alone in his chamber. His mind raced, tormented by the weight of his own wickedness. How had he never thought of this? For years, he had justified his actions. He was the ruler. He had the right. But now, for the first time, he saw his crime for what it was. He thought of the countless fathers who had begged at his feet, the mothers who had cursed his name, the husbands who had watched their wives dragged away, and now, he was expected to do the same. His own daughter was on the other side of the palace, draped in her wedding attire, terrified. He knew he couldn't do it, but if he refused, he would break his own law. His power would crumble. His authority would shatter. His hands trembled. And then, the earth trembled with him. As the midnight hour approached, a strange wind howled through the village. It was as if the heavens themselves were watching, waiting for the king to make his choice. And then, the torches flickered. The chandeliers trembled. A deep, monstrous groan came from the earth itself. The people of Larkana rushed outside. They saw the sky darken, the stars disappearing into a swirling abyss. And then, it began. The palace walls cracked like dry leaves. The ground split apart. King Jalal ran, his feet unsteady, his heart pounding. He reached his daughter's chamber and threw open the doors, only to find her standing there, her eyes filled with something he had never seen before. She knew what he had done to the daughters of this land, and she knew what he had almost done to her. Then, she whispered 4 words, "The wrath of Allah has come." And with those words, the final punishment arrived. The earth roared like a wounded beast. A deafening crack split the night apart. And before the king could take another step, before he could beg, before he could repent, the entire palace collapsed, swallowed, devoured, buried beneath the wrath of God. By morning, the once mighty palace was nothing but ruins. The village was silent, staring at the place where the king had once ruled. There was nothing left, no throne, no soldiers, no king, just dust and stones. And with that, the reign of terror was over. For the first time in years, the people of Larkana breathed freely. For the first time in years, they knew justice had been served. No matter how powerful a man thinks he is, he cannot escape the consequences of his sins. Justice does not forget. Fate does not forgive. The weight of oppression will always crush the oppressor in the end.